The Kansas City Chiefs had a tough decision to make, which they did. Was it the right one? I'm going to tell you why. Yeah, it was. Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. This is Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get everything for free every day on every platform that I can think of, and even some that I don't even know about. This is Matt Derrick, who's here to keep me in line and make sure that I'm not going crazy. You can find his work at ChiefsDigest.com. Thank you for making us your first listen. Check out the draft show for your second listen. We very much appreciate that. Matt, big news, not something I was expecting to wake up to today, that at first it was just, hey, there's a rumor. Let me ask you first and foremost, the speed at which this came out, did that surprise you, or what did you take away from it?
Yeah, this was lightning fast. I was up early this morning, and then so being like an old guy, I needed to take a mid-morning nap. So I just laid down to close my eyes for a bit. My phone goes off, says, "Hey, Tyreek's on the market," and I'm like, "No, you're crazy. That's not really happening, right?" And then 90 minutes later, he's gone. For the public speed at which this happened, it didn't happen that way behind the scenes. No. This was bubbling below the surface a little bit longer than we're probably going to realize. It was like an iceberg. I mean, there was a lot of activity going on below the water that just wasn't, visible. But certainly, I mean, in the past week after the Davante Adams trade and contract that went down, I think it was probably a foregone conclusion that this is what was going to end up happening in Kansas City.
It all comes down to what it is money-wise going forward. And yes, like Matt said, the iceberg. We knew this was going to be a tough negotiation. We knew they were going to have to spend upwards of the area of 20, right? And we knew that the way that they structure contracts, they could get something done to keep the cap low early, make it worth it, and then deal with the repercussions. I was still under that impression until this morning. And then understanding what the cost was. How shocking is it for you? 75 in the first three, so 25 million guaranteed in the first three. And if it comes to fruition, unlikely, but we still have to take it as a year per annum, right? $30 million per if the contract is actually fulfilled. How shocking is that to you versus what we were thinking yesterday?
I mean, versus what we were talking about for Tyreek Hill, before, and I would say even say, let's go back a month ago. A month ago, the conventional wisdom was that the Chiefs and Tyreek were probably going to end up settling somewhere around 5 years, $105 million. That would have been a number that I think the Chiefs would have been comfortable with. I think it was a number that perfectly would have been reasonable. I mean, that would have made him at that point the highest paid receiver in the league a month ago. And then the Christian Kirk deal certainly blew up a little bit of the market. Not as much as we probably realized, because once again, I mean, all these contracts have had some phony numbers in them. Maybe Tyreek Hill sees that last year of his contract and he's making $30 million, but more than likely, I mean, that's a year that gets renegotiated, restructured, or extended, and he doesn't see that, or doesn't live up to it, and there's no way the Dolphins are keeping him. I mean, very, very unlikely he sees that. But then again, at the same time, that's where the market's gone. But, it's what are these are the teams that are doing this making any sense doing it? And with the Chiefs, I mean, if they were comfortable at, say, $21 million a year for Tyreek Hill, okay, maybe they were willing to stretch it. If they're willing to stretch, maybe they go to 22, maybe they could go to 23. Well, now you're talking 25. Mm-hmm. And that over 3 years, I mean, even that, if it's a stretch over what the Chiefs wanted to pay, it's $9 million. That's Melvin Ingram and probably somebody else. And now, if you're the Chiefs, you get $20 million in cap space and 5 guys. Right. I mean, this is not an ideal solution, because I think everybody in Chiefs Kingdom would rather have Tyreek Hill on this team. But what was the other option? I mean, you reach a point where if you're the Chiefs, there's only so high you're willing to go. And you can't just say yes to everything. At some point, when you're paying your quarterback the way you're paying him, and you've got some other contracts like a Frank Clark, and like you're paying Joe Tooney is like one of the highest paid guys in the league. And you know what? You're going to want to keep some other guys here in a couple of years, and you're going to need some money then. You got a plan. At some point, you got to say no. And this was clearly the bridge too far. Maybe it blows up in Brett Veach's face. Maybe it doesn't work for the Chiefs. but I'm not sure that they had any other option. And like I said, I think that once the Devontae Adams deal was done, and we've talked about the fact that Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill are married together through the fact that they share the same agent, Drew Rosenhaus. We probably should have just realized that once that deal was done, the die was cast for Tyreek Hill in Kansas City.
Yeah, and that's what it comes back to, folks. And that's why I said at the top of the show, this was a tough decision, but it was the right decision, because you are costing yourself not just the 20 cap space now and the 5 guys in this draft class that you're going to sign just because of that, but it ties your hands further and further the farther you go into the future, which means you can't go get edges that you need if you can't develop in the draft. You can't go get guys to supplement him. What happened when you lost your third wide receiver this year? What happened when the offense had to condense? You're doing that more so by paying Tyreek Hill at that rate in a way that you can't supplement him. It limits him, it limits the offense, it limits Mahomes, and Mahomes is the key to all of this. You cannot sacrifice limitations while he is still here. Yes, he's got longevity, but Matt, we're 4 or 5 years in already. You could see maybe 32, 35, maybe. Beyond that, those things already have to come into the calculations. And so for me, there was no way out of this once you hit that threshold of 105 over 4 ain't going to do it.
Yeah, and I've seen some people ask the question, well, why don't you just go ahead and let Tyreek play out the final year of his contract? Well, you do that and you're not getting any return. Exactly.
Zero.
I mean, you're not really getting any return. Maybe you get a compensation pick depending on how you sign other free agents, but that's a crapshoot. Yeah. And even then, it's a max of a 3rd round pick. I mean, there's no value there. And you've got a guy who wants to go make the money now, so he's not going to be happy. That's a lose-lose for everybody. So, Tyreek Hill playing out the last year of his contract was not an option. My option was, do you make him the highest paid receiver in the league? In which case now you've got the highest paid receiver, the highest paid cornerback, one of the highest paid defensive tackles. Joe Tooney is probably still the highest paid left guard in the league. You can't have that many highest paid guys. Travis Kelce, one of the highest paid guys. You can't have that many. At some point, You've got to start saying no. And there's another factor in this too. I mean, which is clearly that the Chiefs realize that they have a window with Patrick Mahomes. And I hear fans, talking about how, well, you got Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, maybe you got a 2 or 3 year window to win. No, they view this as they got a 15-year window with Patrick Mahomes, and they want to be competitive in every single one of those years. They don't want to necessarily load up and say, hey, we're going to make a really run at it, for a couple of years and then rebuild. They want to continue to do that. I mean, that's their vision, is that they want to continue to keep things young around Patrick Mahomes. They want to get a little faster. I mean, and the only ways you can do that is by making moves like this. I don't expect anybody to like the trade. I mean, there's nothing to be happy about. I mean, Tyreek Hill was a fan favorite. I mean, he played his heart out. He put up huge numbers. It's hard to say, hey, get excited about this trade because you just lost a guy that you're fallen in love with. But at the end of the day, I'm with you. I mean, I don't know that the Chiefs had a choice. And if anything, I mean, I think that Brett Veach probably deserves a little bit of props for getting as much as he could, because he got a better deal than the Packers got for Devontae Adams.
That's a key point, and we're going to talk about that trade value and all kinds of that, because I don't know who's going to be the leading receiver on this roster now. If I did, I'd go to BetOnline and bet on that, and maybe bet about who takes over, right? You can find all the props and odds and all that kind of craziness that you want to get into to put your money on the line over at BetOnline. It's the best spot for all the updates, the podcast, and all this good stuff. If you laid money down on this Tyreek Hill trade yesterday, you are a rich, rich, rich man, and I give you credit. But the basketball tournament's still going on. You can still bet on that. You can get everything in one spot at BetOnline, where the game starts. Compensation, like you mentioned in the first segment, more than Devontae. Like for you, are you working in the contract deal part of that, or is it just in terms of capital that you like better?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of everything. I mean, but to me, here's what I mean. The Chiefs put out. I mean, everything happened very quickly, but Chiefs certainly got their message put out. It was like, we want 2 first-round picks. Well, they didn't get that, but Brett Veach is going to be able to stand at the podium or sit at the table and say, we got 2 first-round pick value based on our chart. We got 2 first-round picks. When you add all this together, maybe
that's
not.
ludicrous. Let's talk about that for a second, though, because that I'm seeing that constantly. That is not the same thing, people. The congregate is not the congregate. You are talking about a one-of-one receiver, one of the top 3 athletes in this league. I don't care how many pieces you put together and add it all up. It is not the same. I am tired of that argument. So tell me, Matt, explain it. Walk me off of this ledge and see, look, we flipped roles now. You're walking me off. How do you recover from passing or letting go of a player of that caliber that has not been seen the likes of before and is very, very difficult to project to see again, and especially when you're comparing it to the aggregate of selections?
Well, you're not. I mean, that's the first thing that you have to do, is that you just have to dismiss the notion that you're going to replace Tyreek Hill. I mean, you can't. I mean, he is exactly what you said. He's one of one. I mean, Devontae Adams is one of one. I mean, these aren't guys that you just replace. What you can do is go in a different direction. I mean, and that's what the Chiefs are going to have to do. They're going to have to go in a different direction. Now, Brett Veach has 12 picks in this draft, and the aggregate, of this is that, and that's what Brett Veach is going to say. He's going to say, according to our draft chart, you add up the points. This was the equivalent of getting 2 first-round picks. I know you hate that, but that's what's going to let Brett Veach save some face as far as, sure, his point that he's going to make here. But, to me, looking at this draft now, I mean, the Chiefs got 4 picks in the top 65. Last year they had 2 picks in that same range, and they walked out with 2 starters who are impact players. You get a chance to get 4 of those guys, and now you're going to be, there's no argument, Chiefs are going to be worse at wide receiver than they were going into the season. But now I think they've got, if they play their cards right, and this is where it's going to be at the Veach to manage those 12 picks effectively, they're not going to be better at wide receiver. They're going to be worse, but they're going to be different. They might get another guy. Let's say they draft somebody. They're going to get somebody wide. Maybe they'll get somebody wide receiver. Get part of the way there, but you're not going to get, Tyreek Hill. You're going to get better at defensive end. They're going to draft an edge. So now your pass rush is better. Those first 4, if they take those first 4 picks, the first 65, I'm sure cornerback is going to be in that group too.
Yep.
Now your pass coverage is better. Now you're going to get better at probably 3 other positions because of this trade than you are at getting worse at one spot. And, it's trade-off, but you know what? The Chiefs may very well, if they manage this effectively, they could get 15 years of service from 3 draft picks that come out of this haul from the Dolphins. And if they got that for 3 years of Tyreek Hill, $25 million, that's a good deal.
Yeah. I mean, and even beyond that, you all know how I feel, and you hear me say it every year. The draft is won in the top 100 picks. The Chiefs have 6 of them now. It's not just the top 65. They have 2 before 103. So yeah, I'm fudging it there. I'm counting 103 as the top 100. That is like Matt, you're saying, that spreads out what you get. 5 years from each of them, that's 30 years of performance. Now, you don't hit on 6. 6 out of 6 would be the best draft in history ever and will never be repeated again. But you can see it from here, and you can see how it allows you to take multiple shots at a position, especially one of the core 4, an edge being corner, another that they need for. I think that gives you Brett's other coverage that, hey, I have more opportunities to bring more playmakers rather than just one. I want to get to that and really what it changes on the field here coming up next. For me, tip of the spear, right? That's what Tyreek Hill has been. What did teams do? They shifted their defenses to take over the top and take Tyreek Hill away. And what happened? You had to scramble for options. So yes, you will not be as good as receiver. I absolutely agree with you. You will be more functional, and you will have more targets of a higher floor in total than you had with just one excellent receiver. And I think that helps them move the ball better. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. And I think that's exactly what, the Chiefs are banking on, is that, let's say they're going to have 6 receivers on this roster next year. They had 6 receivers for the most part on the roster last year. Arguably, probably, I mean, you could say that, 5th and 6th receivers were primarily special teams players. It was really, I mean, okay, Pringle, Hardman, Robinson. I mean, those were your guys in that middle of the pack there. But Chiefs are trying to get better at all 3 of those, at least 2 of those spots. I mean, Hardman's going to be back, but now you feel like Juju is an upgrade at one of those spots. Maybe you put even say Juju. Okay, Juju's taking Tyreek's spot. Juju's not Tyreek. But
Right.
I like the way your face there. You're like,
Let's not say that out loud again. I don't like that.
on the depth chart, maybe we'll see.
Right.
But and that's what that's what the Chiefs are banking on, is that they're not going to be as good as they were at 1, but they're trying to make sure that 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are better than they were in the past and
Yeah.
upgrading at those spots. And like I said, it's March 23rd. I mean, we're more than a month away from the draft. And at
Mhm.
this point last year, I mean, really, Joe Tooney was it. You didn't have Orlando Brown yet. I mean, there's still
Right.
things to be done. So, I mean, I don't expect anybody to get excited because Marquez, Valdez Scandling is in Kansas City. I mean, and he's not replacing Tyreek Hill. We know that.
Right.
But there's still moves to be made in free agency. They could make a trade. They got 12 draft picks. There's plenty of room that if they wanted to pick up a veteran receiver, they can do that. They can draft. I mean, there's still probably going to be 2 or 3 new receivers on this team in addition to what they have now.
Yeah.
So that's what they're hoping to do. I mean, they're hoping to build this as to be a better core, because let's face it, the Chiefs had one of the best. Maybe let's just say Tyreek Hill was the best receiver in the league. They were still pretty one-dimensional last year in that the ball didn't go to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Ball wasn't going anywhere. That's what they need to fix. They need to fix it so that the ball can go elsewhere.
And spending more money at that one player, at that one position, doesn't help you towards that goal. So that's why, folks, it had to be done once it elevated past that position. But let me ask you this. We'll cover the draft in its entirety. You guys know that's coming. You can check out the Matrix over at rogueapc.com. And if you do, you can use this code or you can use Locked On. That'll get you a nice discount as well. But like you said, that's a month away. Like, there's plenty to come from that as well, right? But let me ask you this. Does this now turn into, with 26 in cap space and a plethora of picks to possibly trade, does Brett Veach start to go try to wrangle veteran players away from other teams that maybe aren't necessarily, advertised on the trade block, but maybe you can squeeze them away at this point?
Well, you can, absolutely. And honestly, I mean, Brett Veach could now start looking for some bargains at a lot of different places. I mean, one, he absolutely has got the ability to go out and make some trades and pick up some guys, like you said, that maybe aren't on the market necessarily, but to go out and look for some players. I mean, I don't necessarily expect him to be looking, other than maybe if it's an edge rusher, somebody that they think is a true impact player, to be looking for a guy that they're going to give up draft picks for and then could give a ton of money to. But the Chiefs now are on an opportunity that, especially with where they are at the cap versus all the other teams in the league, I mean, if the Chiefs wanted to just pick the crop of the remaining best free agents that are out there and scoop them up at bargains, they could do that. I mean, you're in the second and third wave, so the talent's not the same. But the Chiefs could right now go out there, and there's a handful of positions where, they could certainly stockpile some players and some depth right now. And certainly outbidding other team in the league. But I think that right now, I mean, the prices are going to be bargained at a lot of positions.
Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what the timing is about, because there are some positions, whether it is corner, whether it is edge, that with the talent that is out there now, maybe you do have to take multiple shots at it to see who can stick, who can walk in and actually produce. Maybe you have room now to solidify that other spot, and you can say, Melvin, we'll give you 8 now. You don't have to go to camp. You don't have to come to OTAs. Let's just get this on the book so I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, those are the kind of things you can do right now. I mean, there's a difference between, paying Melvin Ingram $8 million for 1 year versus $5 million for 1 year, rather than, paying Christian Kirk $18 million per. I mean,
Right.
If you're going to overpay for Melvin Ingram for one season, I got no problem with that. It's the teams that, we're throwing out free agency contracts in that first wave that just are not sustainable. They aren't going to make any sense, 3 years from now. Those are the things you have problems with. And right now, I mean, the Chiefs could go out and, they could work the 1 year deals to a frenzy right now. I mean, they could pick up anybody they wanted to, because they've got the cap space. They've been patient. They've made the move. Now, it's not ideal, but it's kind of where the Chiefs are.
And those 1 year deals allow you to basically roll the roster over every year until you get to the point where your stars are eating up less of a percentage of the total cap. We're expecting that money in 23 and 24 and beyond. So this allows you're going to have to reset at some point. Now you're resetting when you get the most out of what you can value-wise for Tyreek Hill. I don't think there's anything he could do to make his value better later if you tried to extend him, let him play out that first cheap year that you would build into the contract and then try to trade him when he's 27 or 28. So value-wise, you're not getting there. So at this point, I won't call it a rebuild or even a retool, but like you said, you have that volume that you can go do. Two guys, is Scantling in town? Is that what we're hearing?
He is supposed to be in town. Ronald Jones, running back, is supposed to be in town in Kansas City as well.
Okay, that was the other person. Either of those guys, I think, especially now when you're trying to fill in and get those guys to the volume, some of that can back up Clyde to be really a 1B, all intents and purposes. Maybe a little bit more of a player that you give volume to and beyond what Darrell Williams was. And Scantling, like you said, you're trying to build out a core of receivers now. I can see both of those things happening. Do you like one or the other, or do you think that it's no coincidence they came in today after this trade gets done?
Probably a little bit of a coincidence, but certainly you kind of flood the story a little bit. You flood the bounce. It's not going to soothe anybody's feelings.
Right.
But it'll at least I mean, I would think it probably makes it a little bit more attractive for a free agent wide receiver coming in, realizing that there's going to be a few more balls to go around.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he's like, okay, maybe I got a chance to move up the depth chart here. I'm not going to be a little bit lower in the pecking order. I got a chance to come in and build a relationship with Mahomes and make things work here. But I mean, I think both those guys would have a chance. I think they'd be good fits. I mean, there's no guarantee that either one of them would even necessarily make the team. I mean, that's where I think that, you're kind of at as far as what you talked about is just adding some depth and creating some competition, so that you just don't have a roster that's already set when you go to training camp. But also, and we may have talked about this the other day. We have so many conversations where I can't keep track of which ones are on the air and which ones aren't. But one thing that Veach likes to do is to be able to go into a draft with a full roster so that he's not drafting for need. They can really, truly, to a certain degree, attack positions to either upgrade them, backfill them, whatever it may be. But they're not, just stressed to fill a spot that they have to make a draft. So that's why I'm with you. I mean, if you can get Melvin Ingram in now so that you can pencil him in and say, okay, we got a guy that can go after the quarterback. We're full at linebacker. We're full at cornerback. We've got depth there. May not be, where we want to be, but we've got guys that can play there. And now you can go into the draft saying, where can we upgrade? Where can we build on this? Right now, I mean, yeah, there's a few positions that the Chiefs, if they had to go and start a game and play a game tomorrow, I don't think they'd be real happy with their starting lineup.
Right. They might not have a starting lineup.
That's where I think these next couple of weeks in free agency, you really look at, the second and third wave and you see what's out there and where you can, pick up some depth pieces. To me, that's going to be key going into this draft so that when you do get to the draft, you're not just reaching and making some grabs and some desperation picks.
I agree with you. And you know what? Maybe we ought to explore what that has to look like just with the volume of depth that is still needed. We'll get into that some tomorrow, folks. Thanks for being with us today, Matt. Thank you for all of your work. Chiefs Digest is where you can read, Matt. And if anyone's going to cover this beat, I'm glad it's you because you got all the angles and you're able to talk me down off of my ledges that are few and far between, but they're real.
I'm always there. Anytime you guys are on the ledge, I'm always there for you. I may not be able to pull you off, but I'll do my best.
Folks, you have a great day. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow.